Okay, so I've heard the name a lot, but never actually delved into a whole lot of the information about this person. I know who the person is, I know some of what they've done, but never really got down to the actual story. But let's talk about it a little bit. Hey guys, thanks so much for clicking on the video. This is really my review for Netflix. Actually has a series that actually is called The Conversations with a Killer. It is the John Wayne Gacy tapes. There are these tapes of over 60 hours worth of conversation that was actually had between um, lawyers and psychologists and John Wayne Gacy um, over a large period of time while he was in jail. And the tapes have never been released until now. And then Netflix has come out with a 3-part series on these particular tapes. Now, this review here is the episode 1. And then this episode, they just play him in the tape just a little bit, but not so much. This was very, very interesting. It kind of gives some of the background story about who he is. Usually they start off stuff like this where, oh, how great of a person this person was. No. Influential. He had the gift of gab. He was a businessman. He was actually wrapped in politics. And it started to make sense right away when I first started watching. It started to make sense why they were having such a hard time actually getting him arrested and things like that, because he was very narcissistic. Very narcissistic, very braggadocious about his connections, and he actually did have some connections, some political connections and things that helped him kind of move and weave. And it was ultimately, it looks like it was his arrogance that really got him in trouble. He had arrogance aplenty, and there was some mental breakdown, in my opinion, is what kind of tripped him up. But let's just go into this. Waterloo, Iowa in 1966. This man was there. He had a wife, he had children, and all of this. And he was doing the little politics thing, just the local politics things. He was well connected in the area and things of that nature. Well known, like I said, arrogant. The males who are actually talking, you have his lawyers are actually speaking on the documentary. You have some of the police investigators that were involved, some of the prosecutors that were involved, and they're just talking of what they remember of him and how he was. And they were like, he always brags about his connections and his clout and things like that. And he always was making clout chasing moves and that kind of thing. I was like, very interesting. Very interesting. And what ended up screwing up 1968, he ended up getting a sodomy charge. He was 26 years old, and it was involving a 15-year-old. He had some real issues. And at the time, he was, like I said, married and had children of his own. Then they actually had a man who came in, and he's an older gentleman, and he sat and told his story before the situation in 68 happened and John Wayne Gacy got that sodomy charge. He had actually misused this boy. This boy was 18 years old, and he, it was a whole thing of luring these young guys out to the house and, giving them booze and this, that, thing, and the other, and on and on. And then supposed to be going to some party and all of this kind of thing. And two of the guys left and the other one stayed. And the one thing they always said about him driving real fast, he always drove real fast. And then they had gotten drunk. So the guy, he said, he's 18 years old. And he was like, I felt safe. I didn't feel like there was anything wrong. I felt safe to be able to stay at his house. And then we were going to continue on to go to this party that was out of town the next day. And he said, it was no issue. Well, as soon as the two friends left and it was just him, John Wayne kind of flipped on him and start doing some weird stuff, pulled a gun on him, he introduced him to porn flicks and all of this stuff, and then literally at gunpoint tried to force himself upon him. It was horrible. It was horrible. It was like he was trying to turn him out or whatever. It just weird. And the boy, he wasn't a homosexual or anything like that. He had no interest in being homosexual. John Wayne Gacy, they went through his whole thing where they're playing the tape where he says there's three kind of sexes, and that's homosexual, heterosexual, and bisexual. And he said that basically homosexuals love the same sex, heterosexuals love the opposite sex, and bisexuals just literally have sex without feeling at all. So he never considered himself homosexual. I said, narcissism at its best. Narcissism at its best. You're going to make it be what you want it to be. And then you're going to carry on with that. And then the older gentleman was saying how, he, after he pulled the gun on him and all that stuff, that he ended up telling him, I was just trying to kind of like break you down because I do this whole psychological, evaluation. That's kind of what I do for work, this, that, thing, and the other, and on and on and on. I try to push people to their psychological breaking point to see what they would actually do. I'm like, and the guy, he says, again, he's 18, he's been drinking and everything like that. He said after that, he felt safe again. A whole lot of manipulation, sick, twisted manipulation. And he said, look, we just go to bed and that's it. And then, we'll go ahead on and in the morning, we'll go ahead and get going where we're going to go. The guy said he went, took him, he had his own room. John went in his room, whatever. And the wife, and I kept saying, well, where's the wife? The wife was supposedly in Chicago because he's originally from Chicago. Said that, he said, he was dozing off or whatever, and then said he felt a hand on him. Look up, John Wayne Gacy's on the bed, sitting on the bed. And this time, now he got a knife to the boy's throat, talking this bullshit again. And all of this saying that, we're going to finish what we started in the basement. This, that, and the other. And the boy said, like he did the first time, he started crying and was begging him not to do it, not to do this and all that he wasn't interested in any of that. And he said that, when he looked up at his face, he said that the way his face was is something that still haunts him to this very day. Click, click, honey. He was gone, honey. He gone. But he said that the boy, when he started crying and all that, and he wasn't giving into what it was, he said that he snapped back and he told him, I'm just kind of as upset with myself because I wasn't able to crack you in the basement. But everything fine. Let's just get some sleep and then we'll go in the morning. So he said he literally got dressed and sat on the end of that bed until like 6:30 in the morning and daybreak. And he said at that time he went and banged on John's door and told him, hey, let's go. I'm ready to go. In the car on the way going, he told him, he threatened him. If you ever tell anybody anything about it or anything like that, I told you that I know the governor and I know the mayor and I know this person, that person, the other person, and whatever, and said that all I have to do is make a phone call and within a day, somebody will come here and they'll kill you. And the guy, he said that he never said nothing. He said he didn't say nothing. Not so much of, the killing part, but more of the embarrassment of being 18 years old and having some grown man having you pulling your pants down and got you crying and all the embarrassment of it. It was a shock to his masculinity and his manhood, and he was more embarrassed than anything else, and he never told anybody until now. I was like, this is deep. This is really, really deep. So that's all the stuff that had went on back then. And then he can't, in 19, like he's doing whatever he's doing. And this showed the arrogance in him and how he was getting away with stuff. And then in 1968, he got messed up with a 15-year-old. And that 15-year-old told his daddy, and they pressed charges. And he ended up being thrown in prison. In prison, he literally got the men to follow him and basically rose to where he considered rose to power politically, basically, in the jail. And had the folks following him, just like a little cult leader, and a mess. But this was the real interesting thing about that, where the whole twist is in his mind and with his sexuality himself. He was abusive to homosexuals in the jail setting. There's a man there that was in jail with him who ended up telling the story. He said this one time he walked in on two guys doing their thing at the jail, and he literally took the one and kicked him in the face 4 times until he broke his jaw. So the fact that he was openly gay, that bothered you to the point of you coming out with anger and hurting him, when you do the same thing. You do the same thing, but the only thing is that you ain't outward with it. You hide it. But when there's somebody that's outward with what they're doing, you want to hurt them. I said, oh, very interesting. A nut. A complete nut. I said, wow. So now let's move forward. They go to Illinois. He gets out of jail and all that. Now he done moved to Illinois, Des Plaines, Illinois. And he is doing his own thing. He got this construction business going on. Oh, and also when he went to jail with that sodomy charge, there was no more children and the wife. The wife, he said the last time he seen his wife and children was in 1968 when he was sentenced. He was sentenced and then he was served with divorce papers. Said he never seen his wife or his kids again after that. Because, back then, that really wasn't nobody. So that was it. So I said, wow. Okay, so 1978, he's in Des Plaines, Illinois. And there's a whole nother situation that took place. They start right in. There's a boy named Rob Peast, and he worked at a pharmacy called Nissan Pharmacy. It was Rob, and there was a little girl, and she was 15 as well. She's 15 years old as well. And she was working the front. Rob was working back. John Wayne Gacy came in, and he was always boasting. He was always boasting and everything, and he was very popular about who he was and all of this stuff, and he was saying that he was looking for young guys to work for him. He had this construction business, this, that, thing, and the other. So she was saying how the guy, Rob, he was into photography and all these other little things. And he wanted to, he was there to save up money for a car and they, the things that 15-year-old boys, whatever their little interest, always a car and always something else. So it was a camera and a car. And when John Wayne came in, it piqued his interest. Now, the girl says she was working the front and she remembered it's December in Illinois. So you know how Chicago and that is in the wintertime. It's cold, cold, cold. She had took his jacket. She said, can I wear your jacket? Because he had like a blue down jacket. Put the jacket on. He said, okay, fine. So somewhere in there, the boy got a break. And he said, give me my jacket. And I'm going to go out and I'm going to talk to that guy about the construction jobs that he has. And then I'll be right back in. And she just, she got busy and she wasn't paying no attention. She just kept on doing what she was doing. And the boy never came back in. Then she said, it was time to get off. It was time for him to get off. His mom had came, and she said she'd never forget because, and then they have her. She's actually speaking because she's grown now. Says that the mom came in, and she said, oh, no, he's not in here. He never came back in. He was out talking to some guy, and then he just never came back in. So the mom said, okay, I'll come back. So she said when it was getting ready to be closing time, it was like 10 p.m. at this time, and it's a little while has gone by, and the mother's like, well, where's he at? And she's like, he never came back in, And the mother's like, that doesn't make sense. And then she said, her son's not one to just run away or to just go off. She knew right away something was wrong, and it was her birthday. It was her birthday, and they had things planned. She knew it just wasn't, it was off for her child. So they immediately went and found a missing persons and all of that. And then in the documentary, we're going day by day of what's going on. And it just got deeper and deeper and deeper. They had to go, into this whole thing of like who had come into the place. And, his name came up, this, that, thing, and the other, on and on and on. Once the police actually contacted John, he was very, very arrogant with the police because, again, he knows people. He has lawyers, he has lawyers on hand and all this stuff. They start digging into it and told him, you need to come down, and we just wanted to question you and everything. Because what happened was the one guy he was pretty high up, he had started digging into some stuff, and he saw the sodomy charge that was on John Wayne from Iowa. And he started kind of putting things together, but they didn't really have anything. It went on and on and on. The police ended up getting a search warrant to come out to search the house, but they took forever to even get him to come in because he was just so arrogant. And he had contacted his lawyer, Sam Amarati. He had called Sam and said, something's going on with these cops. And he said, well, just, let me see what's going on, because he told him, I'm being trailed by the cops. What is that about? He said, well, let me make some phone calls, see what's going on, this, that, thing, and the other. Again, there was an issue with him where he really felt like he was above reproach. And he just, like, how dare they? How dare they? So they also have one of the cops that was actually doing the trailing. And he was saying, how they were trailing him. They knew about the sodomy case. He said, we still, him and the guy that was trailing him, said, we didn't think that he actually did it. We were just doing our job. He said it got to be like a thing, like everywhere he went, we went. He knew we were following him and trailing him. And that was that. He said he'd go into restaurants to sit down to eat. We go in the restaurant to sit down to eat. They kept making reference to how fast he drove. He's always driving fast. Like that was just like his thing. He didn't care nothing about speed limits. He just arrogant, Eventually he tried to file against the police about them following him and stuff. And he was trying to get them to be able to stop the investigation against him because they didn't have anything to be investigating him on. Then he slipped up. He slipped up because arrogance, pompousness, and narcissism will always screw you up. He said the guy that was one of the ones that was following said he got so comfortable that he was so busy trying to prove to them that he was this great stand-up guy, he actually invited the officers in his house. Now, remember, the house had already been, they had already did a search on the house, didn't find anything. They had found a crawl space. They looked in the crawl space, didn't see anything out of place, went on about their business. Something else that they actually found, well, let me finish telling you this. Invited the cops in his house. One of them had to use the bathroom. He used the bathroom, and what ended up happening, the heat kicked on. And there's a vent right in the bathroom. And in that vent was connected where that crawl space was. And the smell, he said he knew the smell because he had been on that job so long. He knew it was the smell of decomposing flesh. He didn't say anything. He just come on out, flush the toilet, and go on about his business and this, that, thing, and the other. Because they were in there snooping, trying to snoop anyway, but he used the bathroom. That's what he found. That thing. If the heat had never, just think if the heat had never kicked on, but the heat kicked on. So that was that. Another thing, when they searched the house the first time, they found stuff in the house, but they couldn't charge with it. It was like items that didn't belong to him, like licenses and different things that weren't in his name. You know, like a license. One was a license. One was an ID card, a high school graduation ring, things that didn't belong to him. They found books about homosexuals and hating homosexuals, and there was one book about killing homosexuals. But again, look at the time we're talking about, 1978. Nobody cared about anybody killing homosexuals because nobody liked homosexuals. Nobody had no time for it. Nobody cared. Okay, so that was that. So they kind of just blew that off. They found sex toys and different things like that, and they just kind of was like, all right. And I didn't understand how they just blew that off when there was he had a sodomy charge before, and they just kind of blew that off. And we're talking about a 15-year-old that's missing. It wouldn't go like that today, but yeah, they blew it off. And look, it's the gay thing. Anybody got time? And they just kind of blew it off. I was like, look how far we've come. Look how far we've come. Thank God. Anyway, so they have found a receipt from Neeson's pharmacy. It was, back in the day, you used to drop off film. You drop off film, and then they mail it out, and then the pictures come back. And there was the receipt that was there. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about that. The receipt actually ended up matching up. Later on, they found that receipt matched up with the package that was already there. The package belonged to the little girl that worked at Neeson's. It was hers. Remember, she was wearing Rob's jacket at the front desk. She was doing her work and doing her own personal thing while she was there. When she ripped the top off, because you always used to rip the little top off, that was the part you kept, and you mailed the other part. She had put it in her pocket, which in essence wasn't her pocket. It was Rob's pocket. So that receipt belonged to hers. They got it. They matched it up because they had found that at John's house. They matched it up, and that put Rob at John's house. So all of that's going on. So they got the receipt from the photo stuff that came through. Then they also got the cop that smelled the decay in flesh. So they got all of that. So now they got something to work with. Shortly after that, things was kind of spinning. So this is about 5 days into the 6 days into the investigation. We ain't got down to Christmas yet, but 5-6 days down into the investigation, and John Wayne Gacy ends up calling Sam Amorati and Leroy Stevens, which is his lawyers. He goes into the office and he basically confesses guilt to them. He tells them, basically, I've played judge and jury to many people through the years. They had a drink. People would drink back then. They had a drink, and he just basically told them, that boy they're looking for, he's dead. That boy is dead. This, that, thing, the other. He admitted whatever it was. They haven't said exactly what he admitted, but they said, it was just too much. The guy said he was like 30 years old at the time, just opened up his law firm, and he said, my whole throat just sank with the things he was telling us. He said he's spilling all this stuff out. He's like, this shit's crazy. He said, and then John Wayne Gacy just fell asleep. I said, boy, like, gone. So he fell asleep. He said he didn't know exactly what his position as a lawyer, because you're supposed to, you keep your client's secrets, but what secrets do you keep? You don't keep no secrets like that. He had contacted the lieutenant in them and told him, you can't let him leave here. He said, we're going to try to keep him here. If he tries to leave, shoot his tires out, do something until you can get what you need, but you can't let him go. And it said, the morning came, they were like, we can't just shoot his tire. If we don't have anything concrete, we just can't do that. He got up that morning, he woke up, and he's like, what am I doing here? And he's like, you don't remember, John? You told us all this stuff last night. You don't remember? He's like, yeah, okay, whatever. I don't know why I told you anything, but it doesn't matter. I got things to do. He was real arrogant. I got things to do today. I gotta go. So they couldn't hold him. And he literally got up and speeds off. That's it. So the cops, I'm like, really? Like, are you serious? His arrogance and their lackluster, we can't do this and we can't do that. So he's off again. That was the end of the first episode. This is so very interesting. It is so very interesting. Like I said, I've always known the name John Wayne Gacy. Of course, you know, he's a very popular serial killer. And I knew it had to do with homosexual males, but never how deep. You know, I always kind of thought it was like the whole Jeffrey Dahmer type of thing, but it really isn't. It really isn't. It's a little different. A little different. A little different. Still just as sick and twisted. But very, very interesting. A lot of facts. Like I said, I hear that name floating around a lot, and it just, some reason there, I said, okay, and then I seen this came out on Netflix. I said, I'm going to go ahead and see exactly what was going on. Really, really deep. But this is on Netflix. It's called Conversations with a Killer, the John Wayne Gacy tapes. This is my review for episode 1. There are 3 episodes in this. So I'm going to go back and see what else is going on, and I will report back with you all when I am finished with the next episode. All right, you guys, later.